Hello friends, my name is Shayla and today I'm here to wrap up my Contemporaryathon. Contemporaryathon was a week-long readathon that was earlier this month. There were 7 challenges. I am happy to say I was able to meet all 7 challenges, but not in the way my TBR originally suggested. So let's go ahead and dig right into the things that I read and why my TBR ended up changing. So the first book I want to talk about is To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. So I ended up DNFing this book. I know that is a very unpopular opinion when it comes to the booktube community here, but as I began reading this, I found the character of Laura Jean to be incredibly whiny to the point where I couldn't even bring myself to pick the book back up. So in that instance, I ended up DNFing this book. So I will not be continuing on in this series ever again. At least I know now, and at least I didn't spend that much money on it. I waited till the paperback was on sale, and then there was the additional 20% off sticker. So I'm sorry guys, I was not a fan of the To All the Boys I Loved Before series, at least in the way it was presented and what I was able to read, and I will not be continuing on in this series. So here are the books that I ended up reading for Contemporaryathon. And let's just dig right into the things that I read, and I really enjoyed each and every one of these. First up on the list is Isla and the Happily Ever After by Stephanie Perkins. This is to read a hyped book. This whole series had been very hyped to me, especially when I first got onto BookTube a couple years ago. I ended up finding all the paperbacks for cheap, and I've slowly read through the entire series now. I do have to say Isla and the Happily After was probably my favorite of all of the companion novels. Lola is a very close second, and Anna and the French Kiss is my least favorite. In this one, I felt like our characters were very realistic. They weren't necessarily the most likable people, and I think that made me enjoy the novel more. It was just a more realistic depiction of what would have been happening between the two of them. None of it was easy or comfortable at times, and I really appreciated it for what it was. So Isla and Josh, I felt, were a very good pairing for each other. You know, they made decisions that weren't necessarily right at all the time to read this. I ended up giving it 4 or 4.5 stars. I'm leaning towards 4 stars, I think. Sitting on it now, I would say 4 stars. So Isla and the Happily Ever After got 4 stars from me, and this again completed the challenge of read a hyped book. Next up is Love, Fortune, and Other Disasters by Kimberly Corralius. And this was to complete the challenge of read a book with pink on the cover. And as you can see, there are tones of light pink on this cover, as well as light pink on the spine. I found this to be a very fun contemporary story. This one isn't very well known, so I'm going to give you a little bit more of a synopsis than Isla and the Happily Ever After. So this one is about this town where love just tends to bloom and reside, and people receive their love fortunes from this little shop called Zita's. And the whole town is designed around like romantic pairings, romantic hookups, all of those kind of things. They even have like a bachelor village and a spinster village for people who end up with unlucky fortunes in love. And this is about people who go and try to take control of their fates in regards to love. I ended up really enjoying the story. I ended up giving it, I would give it 4.5 stars at this point. I feel like this one stuck with me. I really enjoyed our characters. I loved all of the pairings in this one, and I just really enjoyed this. If you have not checked these out, I definitely would. Next up is to read a book that was recommended to you, and for me, that was Landline by Rainbow Rowell. A lot of people had recommended this book to me over time, and I ended up picking this up. This is my favorite Rainbow Rowell book to date. I've read Fangirl, I've read Carry On, and I still feel like this one's my favorite. I feel like I related to the characters as well. They were a bit older, they'd been together a long time, and this is about a couple who is struggling in their marriage, and the wife in the couple ends up using this landline phone at her parents' house connected to the landline at his parents' house, and actually ended up talking to the younger version of her husband who, you know, had gone home for Christmas after a breakup, and they sat there and they talked, and they both kind of got reacquainted with their relationship, and it was wonderful. I really, truly, and genuinely enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars as well, and if you have not picked up Landline, I highly suggest you do. Next up is a challenge that, a book that spanned 2 challenges. So this was to read a contemporary graphic novel and to read a dark or taboo book. For me, that choice was Speak, a graphic novel. The book was by Laurie Anderson and the artwork was by Emily Carroll. So first off, it's all just kind of black and white toned. I really appreciated the particular art style that they used in this. And this book is like 20 years old. It's not a new book, but this is a book about rape culture and a girl who doesn't speak up about being raped and how she was treated differently because she called the cops at a party the summer before her freshman year of high school because she was raped. And this is about her dealing with the depression and PTSD of things like that, as well as trying to just move on in her life. This book is beautiful. I really, truly enjoyed it in this graphic novel format. I'm glad I never picked up the novel on its own and I waited until this graphic novel came out. I am so glad I picked it up in this format. I feel like it is so much more impactful to visually see it as opposed to just reading it. Because sometimes if you just read it, you can block out some of the tougher things that they address in this novel, but to visually have it depicted for you, it's really hard to ignore. So I find this very, very, very important. Even though the story itself is 20 years old, everything in this book is still very relevant to what's going on today. So I highly suggest you pick this up if you've been interested at all. I gave it a solid 5 stars. And last but not least is to read a diverse novel and to read the most recent contemporary purchase you have. And for me, that was Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills. I absolutely adored this book. 4.5 stars. I thought it was so fun and I really enjoyed the characters. I loved all the geeky references in this. I loved all the romantic couplings. And oh, I really adored this book. It was so fun. So in the beginning of this novel, our main character, Claudia, ends up overhearing the it couple at her all-girls school break up. And so she knows the reasons why they broke up, and so one of the more alpha personality of that coupling, I would say, well, alpha is probably the wrong thing, the more abrasive of the two in the coupling ended up basically threatening Claudia that if she told, she would make her life miserable, and it all of this centers around a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream that they do with the neighboring boys' boarding school. So there's lots of interaction with all sorts of couplings, all sorts of various romantic pairings, both heterosexual and homosexual. I really enjoyed all the representation that was in this novel. It was such a fun ride. I mean, there's references to, you know, being an MMORPG noob, and there's just one line in here that stood out to me that was funny. Iris is the name of one of our homosexual characters, and she says this to Claudia, and she said, "Oh great, is Straighty McHetero going to give me a lecture on living my truth?" I mean, it's really fun. The humor in it is hilarious. I was literally laughing out loud so hard. When it came to the MMORPG, like, stuff, the newbie references, I was literally falling on the floor laughing at work. I immediately, like, texted my husband and told him what was going on, and I told him, I'm like, I'll give you the details at home, and I read him the pages. He laughed just as hard as I did. So it is legitimately real, and I really enjoyed this book. I highly suggest picking it up if you haven't. So guys, those are the 5 books I ended up reading for Contemporaryathon. There were a couple others that snuck in during that week, but I'm not counting them towards Contemporaryathon, so I will be wrapping those up at the end of my reading month. So thank you guys so much for watching this wrap up. If you participated in Contemporaryathon, let me know in the comments down below what your favorite read is, and I will see you guys in the next one. Please like and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time. Bye!